The sun burned like fire over Rathos 9. A dry red planet where nothing lived except dust, machines, and tired men. For years, Ethan Cole had worked alone in the mines, digging for the last bits of rare metal under the desert ground. He had once been a soldier, brave and proud. But now he was just another forgotten miner in a forgotten world. His only friend was the old mining robot that hummed beside his tent, its joints rusted from years of storms. Each day felt the same, endless heat, endless silence, and the soft whisper of wind moving across the dunes. That evening, as the light turned blood red, Ethan's scanner started beeping. He frowned and checked the small display. It showed a weak life signal far out in the wasteland. At first, he thought it must be an animal or a broken machine. But curiosity pulled him in. He grabbed his oxygen mask, slung his plasma rifle over his shoulder, and climbed into his rover. The engines roared as he drove into the storm, red dust swirling around like smoke. For an hour he followed the signal. The storm grew thicker, and static hissed through his comms. Finally, he saw something through the blowing sand. A dark shape standing still against the dying sun. When he came closer, his breath caught. It was not a machine. It was a person, or something close to one. A young alien girl hung from a metal pole. Her wrists tied, her head bent forward, her silver skin covered in bruises. Around her neck, a small sign swung in the wind. The words burned into the metal plate. "The Baron never forgives." Ethan froze, his heart pounding. He had heard stories about the Baron, the cruel ruler of this sector. They said he controlled the mines with fear, punishing anyone who crossed him. But Ethan could not walk away, no matter who the girl was. She was alive, barely, and she needed help. He cut the rope with his knife, catching her before she hit the ground. Her body was cold and light, her breath so weak he could hardly feel it. When he looked closer, he saw strange lines on her skin, glowing faintly like liquid silver running under the surface. He carried her to his rover and laid her on the seat. The storm howled louder as he sped back to his shelter, the sky flashing with electric dust. Inside the small base, he placed her on his cot and started his medical kit. He cleaned her wounds, wrapped her arms, and gave her a few drops of water through her pale lips. For a moment, he thought she might die. But then her eyes opened, bright silver, shining like mirrors. She stared at him in fear and confusion, whispering something he could not understand. "It's okay," Ethan said softly. "You're safe now." She tried to sit up, but pain stopped her. She touched the collar around her neck and whispered one word again and again. "Baron." Ethan felt a chill. He knew that name too well. The Baron owned every life on Rathos 9, and anyone who touched his property paid in blood. He turned off the lights and looked out the small window. The storm was clearing, stars slowly appearing above the red dunes. But something felt wrong. The air was heavy, and his sensors began to blink with distant energy signals. Someone was out there, searching. He checked the radar. 3 drones moving fast toward his position. Ethan cursed under his breath, grabbed his rifle, and shut down the power grid to hide his heat signature. The alien girl watched him, weak but aware, her hand glowing faintly where the ropes had cut her skin. He whispered, "Don't make a sound," and waited. Outside, the drones hovered above the sand, shining their lights across the ground, searching for something or someone. Then a metallic voice echoed through the night. "By order of the Baron, the fugitive slave must be returned. Anyone found aiding her will be executed." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at the girl again. She was trembling, eyes wide with terror. He remembered the war years, the burning cities, the orders he once followed without question. He had promised himself he would never obey fear again. When the drones turned toward the next ridge, Ethan made his choice. He grabbed the girl's hand and whispered, "You're not going back out there." She looked at him, confused, but something in his voice made her believe. After the drones left, he sealed the shelter door and turned on the heater. The girl slowly relaxed, her silver eyes closing as sleep took her. Ethan sat nearby, staring at the old sign he had taken from the pole. He placed it on the table, the words catching the faint blue light. "The Baron never forgives." He didn't know what trouble he had brought upon himself. But he knew one thing: the Baron would come. And when he did, Ethan Cole, the lonely miner of Rathos 9, would not run this time. He looked at the sleeping alien girl and whispered, "Let him come." Outside, the wind howled across the red desert, carrying dust, secrets, and the sound of engines far away. The storm had ended. But Ethan's war had just begun. When the red dawn rose over Rathos 9, the desert looked calm again. But Ethan Cole knew it was only the calm before the next storm. The alien girl was still asleep on his cot, her breathing steady now, her silver-lined skin glowing faintly in the dim light. He had spent the whole night fixing the power lines and hiding the rover under a rock ridge. Afraid the Baron's drones might return, he brewed himself a cup of bitter synth coffee and sat beside her, staring at the strange marks on her wrists where the ropes had burned deep. After some time she opened her eyes, wide and bright like liquid metal. Her lips moved slowly as she whispered, "Where am I?" "Mining Sector 12, Ethan said. "You're safe here." "At least for now." The girl tried to sit up, but gasped in pain. Clutching her side, he helped her lean against the wall. Offering her water, she looked at it carefully before drinking, as if she had never tasted anything clean before. "My name is Ethan," he said softly. "What's yours?" She hesitated, then said in a weak voice, "Lira." The name sounded musical, light. "Completely out of place in the dead desert?" he asked. "Who did this to you?" But she only shook her head, fear flashing in her eyes. Then she touched the collar around her neck, a thin metal band with glowing red lines. "The Baron," she whispered. "He owns everything here. Even people." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He had seen tyrants before, men who used power like a weapon. But something about this Baron sounded worse. A shadow that reached everywhere. "What does he want with you?" Ethan asked. Lira looked down, her voice trembling. "I saw something I was not supposed to see." She raised her hand, showing a tiny crystal shard hidden under her skin, glowing with blue light. It was buried in the mines, ancient, powerful. The Baron killed everyone who touched it. But I escaped. Ethan leaned closer. The shard pulsed faintly, filling the small room with strange energy. "Why would he kill for this?" he asked. "Because it's not from this world," she said. "It is part of something old, something that can wake again." Her voice grew softer, almost like she was remembering a nightmare. "He says the shard can call the Makers, the ones who built this planet before humans came." Before Ethan could reply, a sharp beep came from his scanner. He rushed to the console. Motion detected outside the perimeter. 3 heat signatures moving fast. He grabbed his rifle, shut off the lights, and whispered, "Hide behind the crate." Lira obeyed without question, curling behind the metal boxes as he aimed toward the door. Outside, heavy footsteps approached. Voices speaking through comms. "Sector 12, no signal found." "Proceed to sweep." Ethan held his breath, the air heavy with tension. The door shook as someone tried to open it, then stopped. After a few seconds, the footsteps faded. The drones outside buzzed away into the distance. He waited until silence returned before lowering his weapon. Lira came out slowly, fear written all over her face. "They won't stop," she said. He will send more, Ethan sighed, running a hand through his dusty hair. Then we'll have to move. He packed supplies, oxygen canisters, a med kit, and a small energy cell. Lira tried to stand, weak but determined. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Her voice fragile yet curious. Ethan paused, looking at her through the dim light. "Because once, someone helped me when I didn't deserve it." He gave her one of his old jackets, far too big for her frame, and nodded toward the door. "Stay close." They left the shelter just as the twin suns climbed higher, the desert stretching endlessly before them. The rover hummed as it rolled across the dunes, leaving thin trails behind. Lira stared at the sky, eyes full of sadness. "My people were brought here long ago. We built the mines. But none of us were free." Ethan said nothing. He just tightened his grip on the controls. "The horizon burning ahead. After a while," she whispered. "If the Baron finds us, he will not forgive." "He never does." Ethan looked at her, remembering the metal sign from last night. The words carved deep. "The Baron never forgives." "Then let him try," he said quietly, as they drove deeper into the wasteland. The scanner began to flicker again. Faint energy spikes beneath the sand. Lyra's shard started to glow brighter, reacting to something hidden below. "There," she said, pointing toward a cracked canyon filled with strange black stones. "That's where it began. The place the Baron forbade anyone to enter." Ethan slowed the rover and stared at the canyon, its walls glowing faintly under the sunlight. Something powerful waited there, something the Baron wanted buried forever. He looked at Lira and nodded. "We'll find out what he's hiding." She smiled weakly, a spark of hope lighting her tired eyes. But above them, far in the thin clouds, 3 distant lights moved, watchers. Drones or worse, the Baron had seen their trail, and the hunt had just begun. The canyon was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that warned of death. Ethan parked the rover behind a ridge and scanned the area, the ground full of cracks that glowed faintly blue beneath the red dust. Lira stepped out slowly, holding her side, her silver eyes reflecting the canyon's strange light. "This is where my people worked," she whispered. "The Baron forced us to dig until the earth bled." Ethan knelt, brushing the sand aside, revealing dark stone engraved with alien runes that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. He felt something hum through his gloves, a vibration that made the hair on his arms stand up. "Whatever this is," he muttered, "it's alive." Lira nodded, fear and awe mixing in her voice. "It responds to the shard." She lifted her wrist, the crystal under her skin glowing brighter. And suddenly, the canyon walls flickered with light. Ancient machines hidden beneath the rock began to wake, gears turning after centuries of silence. Ethan grabbed her arm. "Stop. They'll detect this." Before she could reply, the sound of engines filled the air, deep and heavy. "Dropships?" He pulled her behind a boulder, just as 3 black crafts descended into the canyon, dust exploding under their thrusters. Dozens of soldiers poured out, all wearing the Baron's red insignia. A loud metallic voice echoed through the canyon. "Search every rock. The fugitive is here, and the shard must not be activated." Lyra's breathing quickened. She clutched Ethan's sleeve, whispering, "He found us." Ethan looked up at the cliffside, calculating their only path out. "There's a mining shaft ahead," he said quietly. "We can slip through the tunnels before they seal the exits." He took her hand and moved low through the shadows. But one of the drones spotted them, firing a beam that sliced through the rock. Missing them by inches, Ethan returned fire, his plasma rifle glowing bright blue in the dusty air. Bolts of energy lit the canyon, striking soldiers and machines alike. "Run!" he shouted, pulling Lira into the shaft entrance as explosions roared behind them. They tumbled into darkness, sliding down a steep tunnel until they hit metal flooring deep underground. For a moment, there was silence again, only their fast breathing echoing through the empty corridors. The tunnels were old, built long before human miners ever came. Alien symbols ran along the walls, faintly glowing in rhythm with Lira's shard. She touched one of them, and a faint projection appeared, tall figures made of light, holding the same crystal shards in their hands. They were the Makers, she said softly. Our ancestors worshipped them, but the Baron calls them demons. Ethan stared at the hologram, trying to make sense of the images. Maybe he's afraid, he said. Maybe he knows this power could end his control. As they moved deeper, the walls opened into a huge chamber, an ancient machine resting in the center, part temple, part reactor. Lira stepped forward, the shard in her wrist glowing like a heartbeat. It's responding, she whispered. It wants to wake up. Before Ethan could stop her, a deep rumble shook the floor, dust falling from the ceiling. The entire structure began to hum, blue veins of energy spreading across the walls like lightning. Then a sharp voice cut through the comms in Ethan's helmet. Miner 467. This is Baron Varric himself. I know who you are. Leave the girl and walk away, and I'll let you live. Ethan froze, his blood turning cold. How does he know my name? He whispered. The Baron's voice was smooth, calm, like a man who knew he already owned everything. I own the mines. I own the air you breathe. And soon I will own what she carries. Lira looked at Ethan, her eyes wide. Don't listen to him. He turned off the comms and gripped his rifle tighter. I stopped obeying tyrants a long time ago. Suddenly, the chamber door exploded inward. Armored soldiers stormed in, weapons glowing red. Ethan fired first. Blue plasma bolts lighting up the darkness, echoing like thunder through the ancient halls. Lira hid behind a pillar, her hands glowing brighter, the shard pulsing wildly in sync with the machine. One of the soldiers hit Ethan's shoulder, sparks flying as he fell behind a console. He gritted his teeth, fired back, and shouted, Lira, do it! She pressed her palm against the central core, and the machine roared to life. A shockwave of silver-blue light burst outward, throwing soldiers into the walls like rag dolls outside. The canyon cracked open as streams of energy rose into the sky, visible for miles. When the light faded, only silence remained. Ethan sat on the floor, smoke rising from his rifle, his breath heavy. Lira stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by a faint glow. Her wounds had healed, her eyes brighter than before, but she looked terrified. I didn't mean to, she whispered. I think I woke something. Ethan looked at the ancient machine, its light slowly fading into stillness. From the top of the canyon, the Baron watched through a holofeed, his mask reflecting the storm of light. So, he said quietly, the weapon lives again. He turned to his officers. Seal the planet. No one leaves, not the girl, not the miner. As his ships darkened the skies above Rathos 9, Ethan and Lira prepared for what was coming. The Baron had found them, and there would be no forgiveness this time. The ground above them trembled as the Baron's fleet descended through the red clouds. Ethan Cole stood near the ancient core, reloading his plasma rifle, his arm bandaged and burning with pain. Lira was kneeling by the glowing console, her hands shaking as she tried to stabilize the energy surge she had unleashed. The alien machinery pulsed like a beating heart beneath the desert, each throb echoing through the tunnels. Whatever you woke up, Ethan said, his voice calm but cold. It's not going back to sleep. Lira looked up at him, her silver eyes glowing softly. The Makers built this world as a prison, she whispered. But the Baron turned it into a tomb. Her words sent a chill down his spine. He checked the scanner. Multiple hostiles inbound, closing fast. They had minutes at best, Before the Baron's troops reached the chamber, Ethan turned to the mining console nearby. Connecting old power conduits from his shelter. "We can use these tunnels," he said. "Collapse them. Trap the troops inside," Lira nodded, though she looked pale and exhausted. "And what about you?" He smirked faintly. "I'll buy us time." As the first soldiers dropped into the lower shafts, explosions shook the walls. Dust and sparks filled the air. Ethan fired from cover, each shot echoing in the darkness. Blue plasma burned through armor, while alien echoes hummed in the background. Lira watched from behind the console, her hands pressed against the core, channeling energy into the walls. Symbols lit up like constellations. Lines of power stretching through the tunnels, like veins. Suddenly, the ground cracked open, revealing an enormous construct buried beneath. A colossal alien war machine sleeping under the sand. Its eyes, twin spheres of light, slowly flickered to life, casting blue shadows through the cavern. Lira gasped. "It's one of the Guardians. Protectors of the Makers." Ethan stepped back, watching in awe as the machine rose. Metal grinding like thunder, the soldiers stopped firing, staring in terror as the massive being awakened. Above ground, the Baron watched from his command ship, his mask reflecting the rising glow. "Fire everything," he ordered coldly. Dozens of gunships released plasma missiles, the sky burning with trails of fire. But as the blast struck, the sand erupted in silver light. A barrier shield unfolded. Deflecting the explosions, the Guardian's arm extended, firing beams of energy that sliced through the Baron's ships like paper. The desert became a battlefield of light and fire, the horizon flashing with destruction. Inside the cavern, Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her toward the tunnel exit. "We need to move. That thing's going to level the planet," he shouted. But she resisted, shaking her head. "It's not attacking us. It's protecting the shard." The Guardian lowered its massive head, glowing eyes focusing on Lira, in a deep voice like rumbling mountains. It spoke, "Bearer of the Maker's Key, the cycle begins again." Ethan's heart pounded. "What does it mean?" Lira looked terrified. "It means the weapon is awake, and the Baron will stop at nothing to control it." The ground exploded again as another squad dropped in. Elite soldiers clad in dark exosuits. They surrounded them, weapons raised, red visors glowing. "By order of the Baron, surrender the alien and the human will be spared," one of them said. Ethan's response was a plasma bolt that vaporized the man's helmet. The firefight returned with brutal fury. The chamber filled with smoke and screams. Ethan fought like a man possessed. Every shot precise, every move desperate. But there were too many. He was hit in the side, pain flashing white through his vision. Before he fell, Lira stepped forward, her hands glowing brighter than ever. Energy poured from her body, merging with the Guardian's core. A blinding surge of light spread across the battlefield, consuming everything in a wave of silver flame. When the light faded, the soldiers were gone, the chamber silent. Ethan groaned, trying to stand, his eyes adjusting to the new light. The Guardian was kneeling, half buried again, its chest dim, its energy spent. Lira stood at the center of the room, glowing softly, but barely breathing. He ran to her, holding her as her knees gave way. "Lira," he whispered, "stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open, faint but calm. "It's not over. The Baron is coming himself." Ethan looked upward, through the cracks in the rock. He could see distant shapes descending, the Baron's flagship. The sky outside burned crimson, storms of dust swirling around like blood in the air. He clenched his fist, knowing there was no turning back. "If he's coming," he said quietly, "then we finish this here." Lira nodded weakly, the shard in her wrist pulsing one last time. The Guardian's massive head tilted, its voice rumbling faintly. The key and the human must unite. Ethan looked at her, confusion and resolve mixing in his tired eyes. Whatever happens next, he said. We end the Baron's reign today. Outside, the Baron's army began to descend in full force. Red lights filling the night sky. The war for Rathos 9 had begun. And beneath the desert of red dust, one miner and one alien girl stood ready to face a tyrant who never forgave. The sky above Rathos 9 burned red as the Baron's flagship descended through the storm. Lightning tore across the clouds, casting long shadows over the desert. Ethan Cole stood beside Lira at the entrance of the ancient ruin, wind whipping at his torn jacket. His rifle was low on charge, his arm wrapped in bandages, and his body heavy with exhaustion. But in his eyes burned something the Baron had never seen in any of his slaves: defiance. The ground trembled as the ship landed, its engines roaring like thunder. Out of the smoke came the Baron himself, tall, armored in black steel with crimson lights tracing his chestplate. His mask gleamed silver, a monstrous reflection of the desert sun. Behind him, soldiers formed a circle, their weapons pointed toward Ethan and Lira. The Baron's voice echoed through the air, calm, cruel, and full of pride. You should have died quietly, miner, he said. But instead you woke what should have stayed buried. Ethan didn't move. He stood firm, gripping his plasma rifle. You hang a girl and call yourself powerful, he said. I call that cowardice. The Baron chuckled under his mask. You think you can save her, he said. She belongs to me. Her blood, her power, her soul. Lira stepped forward, her silver eyes glowing brighter with each heartbeat. I belong to no one, she said softly, her voice trembling with anger. Not anymore. The shard in her wrist flared to life, sending streaks of light across the sand. The Guardian's head, still half buried behind them, began to glow again. The Baron raised his hand, signaling his troops. Kill them both. Gunfire erupted, plasma bolts lighting up the storm. Ethan pulled Lira behind a fallen pillar, returning fire with deadly accuracy. The air turned white-hot, explosions shaking the ground as drones swarmed from the sky. But something deep within the ruins stirred. Responding to Lira's energy, the ancient walls cracked open, releasing streams of silver-blue light that tore through the enemy lines. Lira, the machine, it's waking up again. Ethan shouted. She nodded, pressing her glowing hand against the ground. The energy spread out like ripples across the desert. And from beneath the dunes, more massive shapes began to rise. Giant constructs, guardians, emerging from the earth, each one shining with ancient power. The soldiers opened fire, but their weapons were useless against the storm of light. One by one, the Baron's dropships exploded, their engines ripped apart by the alien force. The Baron roared in fury, tearing off his mask to reveal a scarred human face, cold and filled with rage. You think this changes anything? He shouted. I built this empire from dust. I conquered worlds. I killed gods. Ethan walked forward through the fire, blood on his face, but his gaze unbroken. You conquered fear, he said. But you never met a man who stopped being afraid. The Baron lunged at him, a glowing blade forming in his gauntlet. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying, the sound of steel echoing through the wind. Ethan fought with everything he had, every strike fueled by the pain and loss he carried. The Baron was faster, stronger, each hit pushing Ethan back. But when the Baron raised his blade for the final strike, Lira screamed, and the shard in her wrist shattered. The energy within her exploded outward, wrapping both Ethan and the Baron in silver light. For a moment, the world froze, time, sand, and sound all vanished. Then came the roar, louder than anything the desert had ever heard. When the light faded, the Baron's armor was gone. His body turned to ash, scattered by the wind. The battlefield was silent, the storm gone. The air clean for the first time in centuries. The Guardians knelt one by one, their lights dimming. Their duty fulfilled, Ethan stood weakly. The rifle falling from his hands, he turned to find Lira lying on the sand. Her eyes closed, her skin faintly glowing. He dropped to his knees beside her, lifting her into his arms. "Lira," he whispered, "it's over. We're free." Her eyes opened slowly, her voice soft as a breath. "You kept your promise," he smiled faintly, tears mixing with dust on his face. "I told you I don't run." She reached up, touching his cheek. "The Makers will remember you." "Ethan Cole," she said, "the human who forgave when the Baron never could." Her hand went still. The light fading from her skin, Ethan held her close. The desert wind carrying her last words into the silent horizon. Hours later, the sun broke through the clouds, shining over the ruins of Rathos 9. The sign that once read, "The Baron never forgives," lay buried beneath the sand. Ethan placed Lyra's shard upon it. The crystal glowing faintly one last time, he whispered. "Then maybe it's time someone finally did." He turned and walked toward the rising dawn, the red dust swirling around him like fire. Behind him, the world the Baron built was gone. And from its ashes, something new began.